So I just wanted to, first of all, introduce myself. I am Mykel Wedig. I just started with Edge on February 4th. Edge is a verification cooperative, and we have an 8-state footprint in the upper Midwest. We're really happy to be partnering with South Dakota dairy producers and happy to be invited here. A little bit about me. I'm from a dairy farm in southwest Wisconsin, and I graduated from Iowa State, and I worked in DC for about 6 years in ag policy, and now I am back in Wisconsin and working for Edge. To start off, we'll just go over a little bit about new Congress. Edge is lucky enough to have 7 members on the House Ag Committee and 10 members on the Senate Ag Committee in our footprint. So we've got a great membership and a lot of folks to be able to go to really carry our weight in Congress. Let's talk a little bit about the Ag Committees. Senator Stabenow is now in charge of the Senate Ag Committee, and David Scott is now in charge of the House Ag Committee. Their priorities are a little bit different than last Congress. They both said climate change and racial justice for minorities in USDA will be a big thing during their time as chairman. And that is reflected really in the $1.9 trillion package. There is some money for dairies, for food purchases, but there is also a lot of money for SNAP programs as well as debt relief for minority farmers. A little bit more on them. Debbie Stabenow is going to be great for dairy. She always has been, so we're happy to have her there. David Scott has been on the committee for a long time, and although he doesn't have a big dairy district, I think he'll be great, and I know he's got a lot of great staff to really help him out in that area. Senator Bozeman is now the ranking member for the Senate Ag Committee. With Senator Roberts retiring, he's now taking that position. He's from Arkansas and a great friend of ag. Obviously not a lot of dairy in Arkansas, but I think he'll have a great staff and give us an opportunity to educate him on that. And then the ranking member of the House Ag Committee is G.T. Thompson. He's from Pennsylvania and has been a great member for dairy, and so we look forward to having him on that in that position. With the new administration, obviously, the Biden administration has put out a record number of executive orders in the first couple days here, first couple weeks here, and a lot of them are on climate and immigration, which are 2 big areas for dairy producers. And then he's also put his staff into place, and Secretary Vilsack is an oldie but a goodie. He spent 8 years in the Biden administration, in the Obama administration, so he can really hit the ground running. He has said that climate will be a big part of his administration too. And yesterday he gave his first public comments as the Secretary of Agriculture and said that he hasn't met with his climate team yet, but that will be a priority. He has said that CFAP payments will resume pretty quickly here in the next couple weeks. They did freeze those at the beginning of the administration just to look over the program and make sure that it was in line with the new administration. And another thing about USDA, they're looking at implementing a carbon bank, which I'm sure you've heard a little bit about. They would use the Commodity Credit Corporation funds for that. In order to do that, there's been a push to increase the cap on the CCC so that all the programs currently being funded by the CCC can still be funded, but they are looking into that, and that's something we're watching closely. We're not really sure how that would look, so we don't have a position on that, but something to really watch in this administration. The other person on the slide here is Catherine Tai. Yesterday she had her confirmation hearing to become the U.S. Trade Representative. Her entire career has been in trade so far. She's an extremely impressive person in this area. At her confirmation hearing, we did ask Senator Grassley to ask her a question, and it was his first question on his list. he asked about the administration's commitment to continuing the consultation with Canada about their commitments to TRQs through the USMCA. You may know that the Trump administration started these consultations in December to make sure that Canada, or because Canada has not been keeping up their end of the deal of the USMCA, and so we just want to make sure that the Biden administration continues this. In her response, Catherine Tai said she's aware of the situation and will review it and really wants stakeholder input on it. So I think having her in that position is going to be really good for us. And another note, obviously, Secretary Vilsack came from IDFA, so it's great that he has a USDEC, and so he's got a great dairy background. It's fresh on his mind, so he knows what the dairy industry needs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Congress in terms of EDGE's priorities. A really big one on our list and on everybody's mind is a reliable workforce. We are looking for two things in a workforce bill. First one is to have a multi-year renewable ag worker visa, and then the second part is to have to ensure legal status for all existing workers. We supported the Farm Workforce Modernization Act of last Congress. That has not been reintroduced in this Congress, and we'll see if it turns out to be the same bill or tweaked at all, but we're hoping that that bill gets reintroduced. And we have had assurances that it will be eventually. But in the meantime, the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 was introduced. That bill is President Biden's priorities for immigration. Of the two things that we were really looking for in an immigration bill, it has one of them. It does provide a pathway to legal status for our current workers, but it does not reform any of the ag workforce, guest worker programs. So we would really love to see an H-2A that is reformed to include year-round workers. Unfortunately, this bill does not do that. A little bit more on the U.S. Citizenship Act. It also includes provisions that the farm workforce would in the bill be subject to overtime rules as well as the minimum wage. Right now, farm workers are exempt from that, and this bill would put them into that category. Another note on that also, we do support TN and J1 visa programs. The TN visa is made possible through USMCA, and that is for professionals from Canada and Mexico in the dairy industry. That would be your veterinarians and nutritionists. A lot of folks use that, as well as the J1 visa program, which is for interns. Last night in our social event in Sioux Falls, I got to meet one of the J1 interns that one of our dairy farmers has here in the U.S., so that was pretty cool. Another one of our priorities is better access to global markets. As I mentioned earlier, Canada is not complying with their TRQs as promised through the USMCA, so really making sure that existing trade agreements are implemented as intended, and we have been working on that. And then also, EDGE does want to see the negotiation of new trade agreements and making sure that those trade agreements get the dairy industry access, as well as making sure that there aren't detrimental provisions such as GIs and that sort of thing. So that is a big thing on our list this Congress. Next, I'll talk a little bit about farm policy that works for dairy farmers. It's 2021 and the 2023 Farm Bill is upon us. Came up a lot faster than I expected, but we are going to start working on making sure that anything that goes into the Farm Bill, any tweaks that are made, really are helpful to our farmers and that are workable. So we'll start those conversations really soon about the 2023 Farm Bill. The next bullet point here is about the federal milk marketing orders. It was mentioned earlier about the milk pricing issue that everybody knows about. those changes were made to the Class 1 movers in the 2018 Farm Bill. Everyone was in agreement about those changes. Clearly, it did not pan out as hoped. So EDGE is in on those conversations and trying to come up with or be part of the conversation about what would be a better option. Anything that that is suggested, we want to make sure works for our Midwestern dairy farmers. As mentioned earlier, we're all most of us are in the Class 3 market, and so we want to make sure that anything that is implemented, it doesn't come to the detriment of Midwestern dairy farmers. A little bit about the Feed Act that was just introduced. Dusty Johnson from South Dakota is an awesome friend of EDGE, and he introduced the Feed Act that was introduced in the last Congress but did not go through. It's providing an emergency waiver authority for USDA so farmers can harvest or graze cover crops before November 1st without a penalty on their crop insurance. So we really thank Dusty Johnson for that, as well as several other of our members in our footprint that really put that forward and are doing what they can to put bipartisan, smart legislation forward. Farmer-led environmental innovation. This is kind of the bucket where we put climate change. So the voluntary programs that farmers can use and like to use. So I think that'll be a big part of it as well. Yesterday, the House of Representatives, their Agriculture Committee held their first hearing, and it was on climate change. And a lot of it was focused around conservation and what farmers are already doing and should do more of, which was great to hear. A lot of good ideas were thrown out there, but I think it was a productive conversation for Congress. And then I think this is the last priority, accurate representation of dairy products. The Dairy Pride Act was introduced last Congress. It unfortunately did not pass. We're hoping to get it reintroduced this year. It would make sure that FDA enforces the law. As you're all aware, dairy alternatives are using our words, milk, yogurt, those sorts of things, and so we want to make sure that they enforce the law and those alternatives are not confusing consumers. So we're working on that as well. And then just quickly, a note about the stimulus bills. The one going through right now, the 1.9 trillion one, is the American Rescue Plan. The House of Representatives was supposed to pass that today. I haven't seen that they voted on it yet, but the plan is to pass that today. That $1.9 trillion bill has about $16 billion for ag programs, like I mentioned earlier, about $3 billion for food purchases, which would be good for the dairy industry, and then the rest of it would go towards SNAP and debt relief for minority farmers and things like that. It does also include the $15 minimum wage, but that has been, it's fine going through the House, but then the Senate parliamentarian has ruled that the $15 minimum wage cannot go through as part of a budget reconciliation process, which is how they put through this bill. So that will likely be stripped out of this bill. It'll be stripped out in the Senate and then sent back to the House to be repassed. And that all has to happen before mid-March, which is when the unemployment insurance runs out for the coronavirus packages. So hopefully they will get that all done by mid-March. And then one quick note on an infrastructure bill. There's talk of a $3 trillion infrastructure bill coming next. It's very broad. No one's really sure what would be in it. Sounds like everything, but I think that's somewhere that Senator Stabenow was really interested in increasing the conservation, money for conservation in. So that's another thing to be watching next. I tried to go as quick as possible, but are there any questions or comments on anything that we brought up?